Welcome to Ancestral Voices, We Belong. I'm your co-host, Kim Wheatley. We are so happy that we are launching episode 2 with you, and we're going to have an amazing guest visit with us today. This is a young Indigenous entrepreneur who embraces her Guyanese and Anishinaabe ancestry in a multiplicity of ways. I have known this young woman to be driven and dynamic, and in her work, she has pivoted, expanding the way that she engages with the world around us. So I think she's going to talk about her journey, and that's going to be my invitation to her, is to talk about her journey and how she came to be doing what she's doing now as a young entrepreneur. I love that she brings together the duality of identity and that she has a sense of belonging in both realms. And in Ancestral Voices, we're talking about intersections. We're talking and embracing why we want to come together and why we want to speak to the various community members that we're so privileged to engage with. And I think at all ages and stages, but also, I'm hoping, an inspiration for the listeners. That's my hope.
Hey.
Anin Bojo. So I'm just going to get you to listen for a minute because I'm just going to introduce you and then we're going to launch into a conversation. So welcome to Ancestral Voices, We Belong. We are, we're committed to highlighting the voices of creatives who are in community doing all kinds of things. And I talked a little bit about your background, your diverse background, Guyanese and Anishinaabe, and how that has inspired you to embrace the work that you are doing today. So Alexandria Bipatna is the co-founder, you're the original founder of the Wholesome Conscious. And the Wholesome Conscious is something she's going to talk about, but it's one of the pivots that she has embraced as a young Indigenous entrepreneur. But she's also a mom of a young one. She is an ancestral follower and practitioner of Anishinaabe ceremonies and belief systems. She is also a traditional dancer, a fancy shell dancer, and creates magic with her feet when she dances. She's been dancing since she was a young one. And she's also appeared on the Marilyn Dennis Show, which I think is really awesome as a young Indigenous entrepreneur to have that kind of big platform. And she also has a limited edition cookbook that may be available by request, but we'll get her to talk about that later on. So welcome, Alex. I think that's what you prefer to be called. I know your name is Alexandria Bipatna, but I know you like to be called Alex. Welcome to Ancestral Voices. Would you like to introduce yourself in a traditional way?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. My name is Alexandria, so Anin Bojo, Ngoswaskuni, Indigenous, Michigan, Dodam, Shawanaga First Nations, and Dinjaga. Anishinaabe, Kwe, and Dao, Michigan, Dodem.
It's important when we're claiming a space and place in the circle of identity to clearly identify who we are in Anishinaabe cultural practice. And I think that's the language that you were speaking with us. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I introduced myself by saying Anin Bojo. Those are two ways that we say hello or greetings. And then I said, so I said that's my spirit name, which is Starwoman. And then I said that I'm Anishinaabe, so that's what we call ourselves as Ojibway people. And then I also said my clan, which is Turtle Clan, so Mashike and Dodem. And then I said the community that I'm from as well, which is Shawanaga First Nation.
Great.
So yeah, that was my little intro.
And is that located in Ontario?
Yes. So Shawanaga First Nations is in Parry Sound, Ontario.
Right. Just north of there. Yeah. So you also have another aspect to your identity. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my dad is from Guyana. He's first generation from Guyana and immigrated here in the 70s. So yes, I also carry Guyanese ancestry as well.
Guyanese and Anishinaabe ancestry. In your youth, having to express and claim a space of belonging connected to those two, did you ever struggle with that or get confused?
That's a great question. I think that growing up, I had always had a really good insight as to who I was as a Anishinaabe Kwe, so as an Ojibway woman. And my parents were very supportive of both ancestry, so I don't think that I really had a hard time navigating both. I think I'm much more connected with my Indigenous ancestry than I am with my Guyanese ancestry, but it comes in different waves. So like, as we continue to talk, I can share more about the Guyanese influence and how that helped shape the trajectory of my career and me as a person.
Tell us your journey of becoming a young entrepreneur and really preparing for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a great question. So I think just to kind of give a foundation to what I'm about to share is, I would definitely say that Guyanese people are just very, very incredible cookers and chefs. And I've learned so much of my culinary skills from watching my dad and my grandmother and family members cook on my dad's side. And the flavor profiles are just incredible, right? Like if you think about the history of Guyana and the influence of, India and China and all of these different places that have influenced our food as Guyanese people, it's really incredible. The history is rich. And it's the same way with Indigenous culture too, right? So our ability as Indigenous people to utilize foods that are in season and also foods that are beautiful, honestly, like wild game. Yes. And it's the same, the Amerindians in Guyana too, right? Is just more in tune with nature. And yeah, it's just, there's so many, but I want to stay on track.
When it comes to food, you've kind of jumped ahead because we know a little bit about your history. Okay, so why don't you take us back to the beginning of what you call your trajectory? A little bit of your education, what you thought you were going to do, and then what you ended up doing.
Yeah, so I guess what would be helpful is to go back to when I was in school, what I went to school for. So I originally went to school for English and professional writing. And I thought that I wanted to be in TV and broadcasting, and then quickly realized that maybe that wasn't the right trajectory for me. And I kind of had a mental breakdown because I thought that was what I was supposed to be doing and I wasn't excelling. Long story short, I ended up having a pep talk and was encouraged to go into the health and wellness realm, which I ended up finding myself in at Seneca College at the Newnham campus, and it changed my life forever. So I studied there for 2 years and finished my diploma, but felt like my portfolio just needed to be more well-rounded. So I ended up going to a private college called the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, and that also changed my life. And so, yeah, by no means is my journey linear by any means.
Right. But what did you study at Seneca? You didn't say.
Yeah, fitness and health promotion at Seneca.
And then you went into health at the...
I went into holistic nutrition.
Holistic nutrition. Maybe some people might not understand what holistic nutrition is.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and what drew you to it?
Yeah, so it's just... life happens in funny ways and miraculous ways, and it's always unfolding for, us in beautiful ways that we can't always see. And so going into holistic nutrition was one of those things. So a holistic nutritionist is similar to a dietitian, except we look at the person in their mind, body, and spirit. So we look at the whole person. So to give you an example, if a client comes and they say, I'm not sleeping very well, instead of us being like, oh, well, maybe you should be going to sleep at this time, and that's that, or, sending you off with medication or whatever the case may be, we ask you things like, well, what's your lifestyle like? What's your stress levels like? Have you always been a bad sleeper? You know, when you're sleeping, what position are you sleeping in? You know, what types of sheets are you sleeping on? Are you sleeping on synthetic fabrics? Are you sleeping on cotton? You know, all of those things affect the person, right? Like, has there been anything emotionally straining on you? So those are the types of things that we ask our clients to help work through, you know, any of their diseases. Not saying that everyone has a disease, but if you break down the word. So yeah, that's what a holistic nutrition is in a nutshell. So we look at the whole person, the mind, body, and spirit, which correlates to Indigenous ways of knowing too, right? And then, yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you would get so detailed into a person's lifestyle and then perhaps coaching them on how to improve that in a way that takes in not just kind of a Western medical perspective. I think it does align with more worldwide Indigenous practices connected to what health is and how to approach that.
Yeah, I mean, people are complex too, right? Like, no one person is linear and their life is so simple and black and white, right? So epigenetics play a huge role into those things too, right? So just in a nutshell, because it's like a pretty big word and not a commonly used word, epigenetics is basically everything that isn't your genetics. So for example, your lifestyle, your eating habits, your thoughts, your emotions that you have on a day-to-day, those all have a huge effect on your overall life. And so genetics aren't your end all be all. And with epigenetics, they also help you. I mean, they also reveal things that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise, depending on your lifestyle choices. So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
So would that swoop in cultural backgrounds too? Because that is a real significant impactor for people about how their way of life, how they, navigate every single day. So you did the schooling, you graduated. What was your intention with your accreditation? What were you going to do?
This is such a great question. So I always wanted to be on more of the educational side of holistic nutrition. A lot of people go to holistic nutrition specifically to become practitioners and take on one-on-one clients. And I felt like really intimidated by that because I didn't necessarily feel like my schooling had prepared me to feel, at least 95% confident in taking on clients one-on-one. So I always knew that I wanted to be on more of the educational side, which is the work I was really doing a lot of my life anyways, was education around health and wellness in different avenues, mainly through an Indigenous lens, which was pretty cool. I didn't really realize that until a couple of years ago. And so anywho, I ended up not doing that, but doing that in a way. And then I ended up getting mistaken as a caterer, and that just completely changed my entire business, or what I didn't even know what was going to become a business. Yeah, totally. So when I was studying in holistic nutrition, I was one of 2 Indigenous students that were enrolled in the program at the time. And I thought that was really fascinating. And a lot of what we were learning was like, I don't want to say forefathers because it's not the best word, but it's the only thing that can come to mind at the moment. So much of that knowledge was based off of Indigenous ways of knowing, whether that was here in North America or in different parts of the world. And there was 19 courses, but there was never that 20th course that had Indigenous, ways of knowing. And I always felt like they needed something like that. Anyways, so I was like really inspired by being a minority in that field of study. And I ended up going to this university. And they mistaken me as a caterer. I had given them this card and I said, hey, I'm a holistic nutritionist. I'd love to do a food demonstration for you, give me a call. And then they ended up calling and leaving me a voicemail and saying, hey, Alexandra, we were wondering about your catering company. We have this event coming up. Would you cater? And I was like, I don't know anything about catering. And at the time I was a vegan too, which was super interesting. So yeah, that's how I accidentally fell into catering. And I just to note on that as well is I was extremely ambitious. It's just, I don't know, in my nature. And so I decided to write down a list of goals for 6 months. And if the business, reached those goals or surpassed them, then I would stay in the industry, and the rest was history.
So wait, the one ask made you become a caterer?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
I'm a little shocked that one ask totally made you become a caterer, because that's a very competitive field. It's a very difficult field. You have to work really hard in that world. And you just took a leap of faith and said, yeah, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what really makes entrepreneurs really stand out, right? Like I had mentioned before, as an entrepreneur, there's high risk and then there's high reward. And that's not always the case, right? But I was also quite young. I was in my early 20s, and I think that I could accomplish anything. And I thankfully had the motivation to pursue through all the trials and tribulations that came along with it, because I also didn't have any background in business either. I never worked as a caterer or for a catering company to know the ins and outs of buying food and connecting with clients and then delivering the food and then preparing the food and then presenting the food. And there's so many logistics, right? But yeah, literally one ask and the rest was history. I don't know. It was just like, I didn't realize at the time that the stars had aligned. And for a long time, I was like really combative with like, is this something I'm supposed to be doing? Or, this thing chose me, but like, I didn't choose it. And, but yeah, one ask changed the rest of my life.
It's always interesting that you saw the potential and possibility with having no experience. Like, to me, that's a big wow factor. So what is your company called?
So my business is called the Wholesome Conscious in Catering.
Okay. And why did you choose that name?
Yeah, so that also came to be at a really funny time. So before I even started the catering company, when I was studying in holistic nutrition, we had this business course and it was called Professional Practices. Long story short, we ended up having to do a project where we had to come up with a business name and create this pamphlet. And I remember sitting down thinking like, what would be a cool business name? And I was brainstorming with my brother at the time, and I was like, he's like, what words do you really like? And I said, I really like the word conscious, right? Because like at the time I was a full-fledged vegan. So I was all about consciousness and still am. I was like, I really like the word conscious. And then I said, wholesome just like really helps to wrap everything around together. And I remember we just like sat in the same space with one another in silence for a second. He's like, why don't you call it the Wholesome Conscious? And I said, bingo, that's it. That's the name. And I just think that the Wholesome Conscious really encapsulates so much of the work that I do. So if you break down the words, like wholesome, something being whole, right? Like it's like, when I think of wholesome, I think of like a circle, right? Like something's whole, something is complete. And then consciousness, right? Raising your vibration as a human being and like falling in line with, our optimal selves and in alignment with what, our individual life's purpose is, in this lifetime and in this physical realm. So
how old is it? How old is the Wholesome Conscious?
Yeah, so it's crazy. It's about 6 to 7 years old, which is such a blessing to be able to say. And it's changed so much too. Like I remember I had paid like $5 for this logo on a company called Fiverr when I first started it. And then I was like, this logo is silly and isn't in alignment with what it is now. And so I ended up having my nephew design a beautiful logo, which is the logo we have now. And it's a botanical drawing of monomen, which is our traditional food, wild rice. And I'm obsessed with botanical drawings. And so it's this beautiful modern take on, as a tidbit of our creation story as Anishinaabe people. So, yeah.
Yeah, the food that grows on water. Monomen, the food that grows on water. Yeah. And it's not even a rice. What is it?
It's an aquatic grass, which is super fascinating. And there's so many misconceptions about it too. Like I had opened up a burger and fry shop up in Curve Lake this summer as a seasonal business. And I remember overhearing non-native cottagers talking so negatively about our monomen and saying, they can't get their boats through and things like that, but also saying false claims also, by the way, which I'll delve into it in just 1 second, they would say that the monoman would give the fish parasites, which isn't true. So monoman is a fascinating plant. It's an aquatic grass, like I had mentioned. It also helps to purify the waters, but it also helps to weed out invasive species of plants in the water as well. And it provides shelter for, aquatic animals and things like that, right? So that they're not constantly exposed in the lakes. But that's just a few things that monoman does, right? It helps to provide food for our people, for one, and you can keep the harvest for quite a long time. And it feeds a lot of people. So when Europeans came over, they would call it pocket money because a handful of that monoman could feed a wide variety and a large group of people because it doubles, if not triples, in its size when you cook it.
Wow. Does this wild grass, I mean, we're not grass eaters as humans, but we can eat this wild rice. Is it good for the body in ways that kind of the more commercial rices are?
Yeah, absolutely. What a great question. Yeah, it's a complete source of protein, which is fascinating. It's rich in vitamins and minerals. Like think about where it grows, right? It grows in our lakes. And so all that mud and stuff that it's growing in, it's pulling all those nutrients up from the ground, right? So yeah, it's a complete source of protein, which is fascinating. And you can pair it in so many different ways. You can make desserts out of it. You can make, lunches out of it, like main dinners, main meals. It's very versatile. It's very durable. You can travel with it. When it's harvested and it's not fully cooked, you can freeze it for a long time. It's like a very resilient plant.
It's very beautiful too and tasty. I've heard elders say that there's nothing wild about that rice.
No, there's nothing wild about it.
Real food, and some people in some regions, as Indigenous people, call it country food that comes from the land, and I think there's something to be said about eating locally sourced foods, and wild rice used to grow everywhere. And as Alex shared with us, it's considered a nuisance and a hindrance, especially to cottagers. So back to that story, did you get to speak to the cottagers and say, hey, but did you know, so that maybe you could help flip the switch in their minds?
That's such a great question. I didn't. I was more so observing. I think that being a holistic nutritionist is like a double-edged sword sometimes because you have to take off your nutritionist hat. That's something that nutritionists always joke amongst one another, right? Because if you're always wearing your nutritionist hat and people are always coming to you asking, I have all these ailments, like, how do I do this? Like, it's exhausting, right? So sometimes it's just nice to be an observer and just kind of gather information, collecting data in a way to be able to present it in different ways, whether that's through my catering company or through the educational work that I do. So,
the educational work that you do involves speaking with groups, but also doing food demos, correct? Is that what propelled you onto the Marilyn Dennis show? Because we heard that you were a guest there.
Yeah, so that was such a cool experience. I had just given birth to my daughter, which is crazy, when they had approached me to be on the show. So I was actually on the show twice. The first time was for Indigenous Peoples Month, for the month of June, highlighting my business as a female Indigenous entrepreneur. So I was talking about my business there the first time. And then the second time I actually was on there for talking about postpartum nutrition, which was actually really fascinating and isn't something that's talked about enough, especially on a public platform like a TV show that's really well known and has been around. I think it was on TV for about 30 years or so. But yeah, it was just basically from my work, my educational work and a lot of my guest speaking that got me on that show actually. So.
And where is a typical space or place that you would be speaking besides our
that's
podcast?
Such a good question. Yeah, that's such a good question. So many good questions. So it really, there's a variety, right? So for example, I had mentioned that I went to Seneca College. Shout out to Seneca College. They reached out to me recently to be a guest speaker for an alumni panel talking about entrepreneurship. So that's some of the work that I do, right? So that's one of them. I have a lot of school boards that will reach out to me to do educational work or food demonstrations with their students, which is amazing. I love working with the youth and inspiring them to, build skills to feel confident and competent within the kitchen space and realm, and just touching food, understanding where food comes from and things like that. I think those are life skills that aren't taught in the same way. So I'm really passionate about that work. But also it's so diverse in the guest speaking that I do. Like there's so many different things.
Do you have a dream, like a dream spot that you want to be a guest speaker on? If you just had to put it out into the universe right now.
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, a TED Talk would be really cool, right? Like, let's shoot for the stars. A TED Talk would be really, really cool. I would definitely want to make sure that the things that I would share in a TED Talk would be super refined and like really concise and very not digestible. I think it's important to challenge people when you're something that's like, attainable, and people can walk away with tidbits of information that they'll remember forever. So TED Talk. Why not?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
My parents are literally the coolest people of all time. I wouldn't be here without them. My mom always has given me the courage to really go for things, even when they sound ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Just her go ahead, her thumbs up, like her nod of approval has literally led me to where I am today. And had she not fostered that in me as a little kid, I don't think that I'd be anything that I am today. And then for my dad, he is also so incredible as well. And he's also an entrepreneur, which is super cool. And so the relatability for both my parents, they're both entrepreneurs, has been really foundational to figuring out how to run my business in so many ways. But they're the best. There's nothing like having, solid parents that will come out and help you last minute, or help run errands for you, or, help you think of the things that you would have never thought of otherwise based off of their own life experience. But yeah, I mean, it takes a village to not only raise a child, but raise an entrepreneur. It's not easy. And without a solid foundation, like a successful person doesn't get to their successes by themselves. There's a team, there's family, there's friends, there's solid support for them to achieve the things that they do. And I think that's something that isn't talked about enough. And I think that it's something that's really important to share in the story of my journey. So I really appreciate you asking that question. Yeah, my family has been literally the end all be all to my success.
This is so beautiful to hear. I do believe it does take a village, and I like the idea of a village because it seems a bit more intimate and closely connected and welcoming and safe. And as an entrepreneur, there are many instances where you're not safe because you're taking a leap of faith into the great unknown. But in your work, and you're about 6 years old now, you continue to vision every year, you continue to grow, and you were asked for or approached constantly about some of your delicious offerings. And so that resulted in something. Do you want to talk about that and what you created and why you created it?
What do you mean when you ask what I created? Like, are you talking about menus that I've created for the business, or?
Yeah, I'm referring to your cookbook that you created, the limited edition cookbook. And you had a whole vision behind how you were developing that and why you were developing that. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I started the business with a few recipes that were seasonal. So, for example, one of them was a butternut squash soup, and we put a twist on it. So I call my food First Nation fusion food because I incorporate, traditional Ojibway specifically foods, Anishinaabe foods, and then I incorporate it, with the Guyanese fusion. Like, my family is very diverse too, so we have Filipino, Guyanese, Trinidadian, Jamaican, Asian. The family is very diverse. And so growing up, I was so fortunate enough to eat all these different types of food and learn different cultures in the process from my siblings and fellow family members. And so First Nation fusion foods is my specialty. And so with that butternut squash soup, instead of it just being, squash and, other carrots and celery and however else people make it, I would put in some of that curry powder into the soup. And so that would just create this flavor profile that just kind of would dance on your tongue a little bit and provide a little bit of like, not spice, but flavor, and just make it really unique. So anyways, that was one of my recipes that clients wanted me to make all the time. And it was such a labor of love, because if anyone has cooked with butternut squash, you know that you have to peel the outside, and you have to take out the seeds, and then you have to chop it up, and then you have to, broil it if you want to caramelize it, and then you have to cook it, and then you have to puree it if you want to puree it. So it's like quite a laborious, but also humbling meal that I would make. So every time I would make it, I would always be humbled by the butternut squash. But in saying that, so I wanted to take some of my signature dishes that I was making in my catering company, because people would always ask me for the recipes too. And for anyone who has a solid recipe, you don't always want to give away your secret sauce, right? So after some years had gone by, the pandemic had happened. I decided to make this recipe book. And so I partnered with a fellow Navajo ceramicist, and he made vessels to complement the recipes. But anywho, so I ended up putting in some of my signature dishes in there. So that butternut squash soup was one of them. Monoman salad is another one that I put in there. So my Monoman or my wild rice salad, it would have
Don't tell us all the details. Don't tell them all the details.
No. I'm just giving you an idea of like what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to give away all the secrets. But anyways, it's chilled and it's garnished with beautiful cranberries and things like that. And so anywho, I put in some of my signature dishes from my catering company, and then I put in some of my my favorite all-time dishes. So things that I ate as a kid, things that I love eating now, some Guyanese dishes in there as well. So yeah, that was the cookbook that I ended up doing.
Are there
and
meat
it's the
dishes
first
in there? Are you still a vegan?
Yep.
Okay, so there's meat dishes
no,
in there.
I'm not a vegan anymore. There's definitely meat in there. So I have a Guyanese chow mein in there. I have this delicious curried dish in here. Sorry. I have a toddler that is needing attendance. But yeah, so that was just like, yes, that was just the first iteration and a good taste of what I want to create in the future, which is like a legit recipe book with, lots of recipes in there, not just 8. So it was a limited edition book. It's no longer available, but I am going to be working on another recipe book.
About the recipe book, you've been on television, you're 6 years in. When it comes to your business and the next iteration of evolvement, can you give us an idea of what you're heading towards, what you're hoping to do now or in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I have really, really big dreams. This is like the 2.0. I have been saying that this is the 2.0 of my business after the pandemic, because it really helped me to decompress and get clear on my goals and aspirations for the business, but also like as a person, because I really do feel like this business was like my first child. Like I put everything, my blood, sweat, and tears into growing this business. Anywho, so one of my attainable goals that is definitely going to happen in the next year is being a food truck. So I'm going to be able to cater weddings and powwows and other street festivals and things like that, be mobile and have my kitchen on wheels, which is going to be so super exciting. So I'm applying for lots of grants to get there.
That's amazing.
But there's like so many things, but I don't always want to share all of the things.
That's amazing. And it has been so interesting speaking with you. But we're interested in, and maybe the listeners are too, on where to follow you. Are you on the socials? Do you have a website? Like, how can people connect with you if they want to, just to follow you or maybe to ask for your services?
Yeah, this is a great question. So you can follow me on Instagram. That's my main platform that I use right now. I'm working on getting some awesome photos and videos up on my website. So my website is coming soon, but you can give me a follow on Instagram at the Wholesome Conscious. So it's all one word, THEWSOME CONSCIOUS, the Wholesome Conscious, on Instagram.
That sounds amazing. So my final question, Alex, to you is, what do you hope other entrepreneurs will learn from your story? Leave them one something, piece of magic.
Persistence is key. It is the most corniest line of all time, but it really is so important when you are a person of your word, most especially super important in business, just at a fundamental. When you say you're going to do something, do it and follow through with it, even when it's hard and there's trials and tribulations that, you know, want to keep you from getting up every day and doing what you said you were going to do. When you come out on the other side, you get to look back and be like, wow, I remember days that were so hard I couldn't get out of bed or wasn't inspired or whatever the case is, but I pulled through. And that commitment, say for, you know, the 5 or 6 months, has reaped so many rewards. And also I'm now getting to harvest the fruits of my labor from that commitment and that persistence and that dedication that I had to that craft. Amazing. Of whatever it may be, a big goal or a small goal. So persistence is key.
I'm sure it will. Thank you so much for being our guest. And I hope you continue to pivot into, you know, endless expansion. Again, you are the Wholesome Conscious. We've been speaking with Alexandria Bipatna, the founder of the Wholesome Conscious. Please follow her on the socials, and all the best, Alex. Be well.